Welcome everyone. We're just waiting at just a moment or two, just to give people a chance to come in. I hope everyone's having a nice day. It's a beautiful day out there. Okay, look, we've have given it another minute. Welcome. It's very exciting to be here today. My name's Deb Howe and I'm the Acting Commissioner at the Mental Health Commission of New South Wales. It's an absolute privilege to be here today to spend some time with you. I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining us at the launch of the Leading the Change, a toolkit to evaluate lived experience, inclusion and leadership. I'd like to start by asking Commission team members Fee Pasculich and to give an acknowledgement of country, and today Henkel to give an acknowledgement to lived experience.
Thanks, Deb. I would like to start our meeting off by acknowledging country. I'm joining you from the beautiful lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation here in Sydney. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands of where we work and walk and live, anywhere that you're joining us from today online. We can celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of New South Wales and all across the continent. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, while celebrating the strength, resilience and wisdom of Aboriginal people across this land, which has never been ceded.
Thanks, Fee.
Over to you, Daya.
Thank you, Deb. So as a person with lived experience of mental distress and recovery, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this important event. I'd like to acknowledge people with a lived experience of mental distress and recovery and the lived experience of their carers, families and kinship groups. At the Mental Health Commission of New South Wales, we are committed to amplifying the voices of all people with a lived experience. We value and respect their wisdom and expertise and the bravery it can take to speak up. Together, we will work to ensure people's meaningful right to live healthy lives free from stigma and discrimination. I'd also like to particularly acknowledge lived experience leaders who have laid the foundation for us to be releasing this toolkit today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much to Fee and Daya, both powerful acknowledgements. We do have a few hands going up, team, so I'm just wondering if there's people might be having any issues in the background, so I'll leave that with you. So thank you both, Fee and Daya. Wonderful. We've got some fantastic speakers today who are going to highlight the importance of lived experience inclusion and support the Leading the Change toolkit that can be provided by the organisations. Our first speakers on the agenda is Deputy Commissioner, Tim Heffernan, who will talk about the importance of lived experience leadership. Priscilla Bryce will then speak, and Priscilla is the CEO of Being at Mental Health Consumers, and she'll reflect on the importance of integrating lived experience at all levels of the organisation. We'll then welcome Jonathan Harms, CEO of Mental Health Carers New South Wales, and Jonathan will discuss the importance of collaboration and incorporating different perspectives and experiences by using the toolkit. Fee is a Senior Policy Analyst and Daya, the Acting Manager of Advocacy and Reform. They'll take us through the key elements of the toolkit and, importantly, how to access a copy before we finish with some questions. So get your questions out, start thinking about those now. If you do have questions during the presentations, please drop them in the Q&A and we'll answer as many as we have time for today. If there are any more than we can get to, they'll be published on our website as a commonly asked questions. And just want to say also, if you're wanting to have captions on your recording, please go to the 3 bars at the top and go down to, I'll just tell you where it is, is it language and speech? Is that where it is, team? And click on the captioning button. So we're extremely proud to be launching the toolkit today. It's resulted it's been a work in progress. Countless hours and dedication by the team have put into it, and with our partners being in mental health carers. And there's been a lot of energy and collaboration that have gone into this, which has been fantastic to see. The toolkit arose from Action 9 of New South Wales Living Well in Focus 2020 to 24 strategy, and was developed to meet the needs for more resources to support organisations in building and evaluating lived experience, inclusion and leadership. Isn't that amazing? Like that's fantastic. It builds on the strategic work already done in the Lived Experience Framework for New South Wales, which was published in 2018, which was co-designed by the Commission, consumers, carers and sector stakeholders. I can see a thumbs up, so people know about that. The project was led by Daya for the Commission, working in partnership with teams at Being and Mental Health Carers New South Wales, and drawing on lived experience and lived expertise to co-produce the toolkit. It's not something that the Commission could have done alone. It was essential that this work was done in partnership with lived experience communities and led by people with lived experience. I'd like to thank our partner organisations, Being and Mental Health Carers New South Wales, who we'll also be hearing from today. Those who contributed to the development of the toolkit through co-design with our organisations and yarning circles with First Nations Co. And to everyone who provided feedback and took the time to review the work as we progressed. Thank you all so much. I know that this is all a heartfelt joy today when we're actually publicly acknowledging your work and actually bringing this to life to the community. The Leading the Change Toolkit provides practical guidance for mental health and social services and organisations, supporting them to self-reflect, examine and evaluate their current levels of lived experience, inclusion, partnership and leadership. It also offers practical steps to help organisations create an action plan to further develop partnership opportunities and lived experience leadership. At the Commission, we highly value and respect the importance of lived expertise and have committed ourselves to use the toolkit to reflect on our own lived experience, inclusion and leadership, and to consider how we can further develop as an organisation in this area. I'm really, really looking forward to that when we've already started on this work. I encourage you to walk alongside us, to use the toolkit in your organisations so together we can commit to further supporting and celebrating the expertise of people with lived experience of mental health issues, as well as their carers, family and kinship groups. I'd now like to introduce Deputy Commissioner Tim Heffernan. Tim is well known to you all. He's an amazing advocate and an amazing person, and he's an expert peer worker with many years of experience in peer leadership roles, including as peer coordinator with Coordinaire, Southeastern New South Wales Primary Health Network, and speaks from experience about the importance of lived experience leadership. Over to you, Tim.
Great, thanks, Deb, and thank you so much for that temporary elevation in my leadership status at the start of the webinar. Much appreciated. The shortest living commissioner in the history of the Mental Health Commission. Look, I want to speak from lived experience, and I want to add to that by, I think, my most important grounding for my leadership has always been within the public mental health system down in Illawarra, Shoalhaven Local Health District, and also as various roles I've had in the year in what's now known as the Consumer Worker Committee, Peer Committee, and the relationship I've had over the years with Being in various roles and current roles on the board there. I think that they're all significant, as was the work at Coordinaire. Speaking from personal lived experience, I would like to reiterate and reinforce the importance and value of true co-production and lived experience leadership for this project. And more broadly, the sector, and the sector is for people, for people with lived experience, for the carers, family, kinship groups, for people working in our mental health systems, and generally lived experience benefits our whole society. Everyone involved in mental health care has a role to play in creating a better system, a better world. It can't be the work of peer workers and community advocates alone, nor can organisations create the changes needed without the input of those with lived experience. So commitment from the top, from the CEO, executive and leaders is absolutely essential to support true leadership, true partnership, shared decision making and collaboration across and between organisations. I think here I'll just pause to reflect that, you know, there are different types of leadership that we're looking at. We're looking at, I think, very much in lived experience expertise. We bring our own personal lived experience. We bring the cumulative lived experience, the fights from the 60s of the lived experience consumer movement. And we bring our learned lived experiences, people who are doing qualifications and are learning from others as well. Our leadership is collaborative, it's shared, it's relational, it's leading with, it's walking with, it's being there when you need to be, it's being there with people, it's adaptive, and it always supports other people into leadership positions. My own experience of leadership, I think, as I mentioned before, in the public mental health system and in governance, I think the example that is most important to me is the Mental Health Commission itself. In our legislation that was set up, that one of the commissioners or deputy commissioners must have a lived experience of mental health issues. We're setting, and have set since 2012, the yardstick for other organisations to have people right there at the top. And, you know, I draw on the shared leadership with my colleague Faye Jackson, who was one of our deputy commissioners. But I love the way that Faye also talks about co-leadership, that, you know, we talk about co-design, the process that we've been through here, but co-leadership. And also the idea that each one of us, every one of us, are leaders, are lived experience leaders in our own right. And we just have to find those pathways and trust ourselves and to understand our strengths. And that's really important. We're moving into an era of leadership for lived experience. We have our state peaks, which have been around since for a long time. We're moving towards a national peak body with the National Mental Health Consumer Alliance. We're looking at a national peer workforce association. We have peers working in leadership positions in primary health networks, in local health districts, in community managed organisations. We have peer leaders in the ministry. Leading the change is a tool that continues to develop the past and present work of the consumer and carer movements, and it complements other resources available that support lived experience inclusion and leadership. It builds on this tremendous library of resources that we have. I want to emphasise that the toolkit is not a prescriptive endpoint. It's designed as a tool to help organisations reflect, identify partnerships with consumers and carers to improve experiences within the health and social care system. So it encourages us, and I encourage you to reflect honestly and transparently on how your organisations currently sit with the levels of lived experience, inclusion and leadership, your partnerships with consumers and carers, and your willingness to be open to learning and change. The benefits are well worth the effort of implementing the toolkit. So please, let's take the time to look at it carefully and undertake that implementation process. So thank you all, and I'll pass back to Deb.
Thanks, Tim. That was lovely and well done. I mean, I loved when you said that lived experience, you know, it's everyone, you know, across the system that has an impact on improving the system. That's fantastic to hear. Look, I'm now going to introduce Priscilla, and Priscilla Bryce is the CEO of Being Mental Health Consumers, which is the peak body advocating on behalf of consumers for mental health systemic advocacy in New South Wales. Prior to joining Being, Priscilla founded and was managing director of Altogether Now, a racial equity organisation. Priscilla identifies as neurodivergent and has lived experience of mental health challenges throughout her life. Please join me in welcoming Priscilla.
Thanks, Deb. And thanks also, Tim, for your inspiring comments about lived experience. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. And I'd also like to recognise people with lived experience and their family, carers and kin. So, as you know, Being is the peak body for mental health consumers in New South Wales, and we are very encouraged and excited to see the finalisation and launch of the Leading the Change Toolkit. This toolkit will support human services organisations to regularly review the effectiveness of their lived experience inclusion strategies. We at Being really hope that it will encourage and assist them to expand the inclusion of identified consumer roles at all levels of their organisations, with the key word there being all levels. It is vital that this includes not only peer workers, but also better representation of lived experience at the senior levels of leadership, as well as in program and service development. We also hope that this will help to overcome the tendency within services to co-opt key workers into every project requiring a lived experience perspective, as well as providing more expansive career opportunities for those of us who wish to progress into roles at higher levels. Development of the project as a collaboration between Being, Mental Health Carers New South Wales and the New South Wales Mental Health Commission has demonstrated the effectiveness of collaboration between the state peaks and the Commission in those areas where there are shared goals. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Priscilla. That was lovely to hear from you. I'd now, and thank you for the role that Being has played in developing this toolkit, and we look forward to further collaborations in the relationship into the future. So thank you so much. I'd now like to introduce our next speaker, Jonathan Harms, CEO of Mental Health Carers New South Wales. Jonathan joined Mental Health Carers New South Wales in 2009, becoming the CEO in 2021. Under his leadership, the organisation achieved accreditation in early 2020, initiating projects such as the Mental Health Carer Peak Advisory Committees and the Mental Health Carer Advocacy Network Registrar. In 2022, the MHCN won the Psychosocial Disabilities Systemic Advocacy Responsibilities in New South Wales. For New South Wales. Jonathan also serves on the Mental Health Commission's representative to Mental Health Carers Australia and the Mental Health Alliance in New South Wales. Welcome to Jonathan.
Thanks, Deb, and congratulations on your appointment as Commissioner. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands upon which we meet, in my case, the Gadigal of the Eora Nation. And I'd also like to recognise people with lived experience of serious and persistent mental distress and their family, friends, carers and kin who try to support their recovery journey. I'd like to thank the Mental Health Commission for undertaking this Leading the Change project and including us in their work as the peak body representing families and carers of people with experience of mental health concerns. The Commission has displayed an exemplary commitment to keeping the voice of lived experience at the centre of change, and this project was another attempt to help make this practical and achievable for New South Wales mental health services. The way in which the Commission went about this project is a good example of its commitment to co-design and co-production, and an example of those principles in action. The Commission assembled the project steering team with lived experience researchers and lived experience representatives to discuss the idea for a project around assessing the benefit achieved by co-design projects. However, as a result of the extensive discussions with the lived experience researchers and representatives, it was realised that what was really needed to support co-design was subtly different, based on the lived experience of those who tried to support the practical implementation of co-design in New South Wales Health Services. It was felt by the representatives that there was some distrust and cynicism around co-design by many people. This was partly because of a lack of understanding of what co-design entails, and many had been called upon to do co-design without really having a strong grasp of its core principles. This led to experience of non-genuine co-design processes and the experience of often mediocre outcomes achieved by inauthentic co-design. This meant that in order to have a really valuable tool, we needed to make the case for co-design with services, its benefits and its applications. We have to make sure that genuine co-design processes are implemented and not just a public relations exercise or a consultation with a predetermined outcome already in place. So we have to be able to tell staff what co-design entails. We need to be able to give them practical clues about how to do some of the complicated things like addressing power imbalances. And finally, we need to be able to evaluate the outcomes the new co-design features achieves. All these elements were better understood and refined as a result of the discussions with the lived experience representatives. This is reflected in the features of the final toolkit, with its rationale evidence base to help provide that evidence to make the case and to understand what co-design is. The methodology supports for principles and considerations around the implementation of genuine co-design processes, and the resources that provide practical tips for co-design and co-production from planning to eventual evaluation. So we went a long way from just how do we evaluate the outcomes of co-design projects. The project team allowed lived experience voices to redefine the project in some aspects, and so came up with more practical supports for real life co-designers in New South Wales health settings. This demonstrates the ability of co-design processes to discover very practical solutions unsuspected by professional staff at the outset to seemingly complex problems, and also the importance of letting voices speak for themselves. We're not going to find out anything we don't know if we don't let them speak. Incorporating broad perspectives to appreciate and balance the sometimes competing needs of consumers and carers, as well as the practical issues faced by service providers, is critical to the success of co-design. And therefore, MHCN commends the Commission for developing this toolkit and looks forward to incorporating it into our own internal process improvement suite of tools, but also to seeing it used in action across New South Wales to help improve the outcomes and the experience of people with lived experience and their families and carers. Thank you very much, Deb.
Oh, thanks so much, Jonathan. You've given us a lot to think about there, and I think particularly you're highlighting the importance of the co-design element of this particular resource, which was essential. It's a nothing without us. I think it's really nothing about us without us. Yeah. So thank you for that. That was wonderful. I'm now going to, and we look forward to working with you and MHCN in future projects as well. So something that's really looking forward to that. What I'm going to do is now invite Daya and Fee to talk us through the toolkit itself. So over to you, Daya and Fee.
Great, thank you, Deb. Good morning, everyone. So today we'll take a few minutes to give a top-level overview of the Leading the Change project. So as mentioned earlier, this work fulfills an action from Living Well in Focus, completed in partnership by our 3 organisations. So that's the Commission, Being and Mental Health Carers New South Wales. Development of Leading the Change included desktop research, co-design activities and yarning circles with consumers, carers, Aboriginal communities and sector stakeholders, led by Being, Mental Health Carers New South Wales, First Nations Co and the Commission respectively. The project also included iterative review as we developed the toolkit by the project working group with a focus on lived experience perspectives. We also held a sector workshop to test the toolkit in late 2023, which provided positive feedback. So what is the toolkit? So Leading the Change is a practical toolkit to support self-reflection, evaluation and action planning for lived experience inclusion and leadership in mental health and social services organisations. It enables organisations to assess their level of maturity for lived experience inclusion, monitor and measure inclusion and impact, and identify areas for growth. It has 4 key elements. That includes the rationale. So that's really providing the evidence base for why embedding and evaluating lived experience inclusion and leadership is essential work for organisations. It includes the methodology, which covers principles and considerations for evaluating lived experience inclusion and when involving people with lived experience in evaluations, as well as examples of evaluation tools and guides. And these guiding principles are also aligned with the Lived Experience Framework for New South Wales, which was co-designed and released by the Commission in 2018. We also have a resources section, which provides relevant resources for organisations to get more information and is collated under 4 key headings. So that includes key standards, plans, frameworks and guides, lived experience guides and research, co-design and co-production, as well as evaluation resources. And last but certainly not least, we're quite excited about this one. We also have a checklist. So this is a tool for organisations to use to reflect, self-assess and identify future actions. Now the toolkit is currently available as a single PDF and limited printed copies, including all 4 elements. And the checklist tool content is included as an appendix in the main document and also available separately as an interactive PDF to use for scoring and building an action plan. So it was really important through our co-design activities that the toolkit was practical and easy to use. So the checklist is interactive and will automatically populate an action plan for organisations. Now, the toolkit is available via the New South Wales Mental Health Commission website now, via our Lived Experience and Peer Workforce tab, and it's also available via the QR code, which is on screen for you now. And don't worry, we'll also show this code a little bit later as well for you to access. I'll now hand over to Fee for the next slide. Fee is one of our senior policy advisors here at the Commission and was really a project lead for this toolkit. So over to you, Fee.
Thank you, Daya. I'll talk you through a couple of the key elements of the toolkit. On your screen now is a sample page from the methodology. The methodology section is a deep dive into some practical guidance for doing the work of including people with a lived experience in your organisation, and particularly considerations for evaluations, whether you're bringing people with lived expertise into evaluations, whether you're evaluating work related to lived experience. It's underpinned by theory and research, and there are resource examples throughout in the shaded sections to give you those links to the further guides and tools to do the work. So it wasn't intended to be an exhaustive prescriptive document. It's really about going, here are some things to think about and to consider, and then pointing you to where you needed to go to get further information to do that work. There's questions throughout to consider as you're doing the work. So it's really inviting that reflection, that consideration, that exploration of the work. We'll look at the checklist now, sample page from the checklist. The checklist provides a tool for organisations to use to measure your levels of inclusion and to map out an action plan to improve those. There are 5 domains within the checklist. There's leadership commitment, governance, co-design and co-production, workforce and outcomes. And the structure of the checklist takes you through the domain heading at the top. So on the screen in the dark orange at the top, leadership commitment is the first domain, has a domain aim underneath each heading, so where we're heading for within that domain. And underneath each domain, there's 4 or 5 questions that an organisation or whoever's completing the checklist would ask about the work of the organisation or the team or project. And both of the domain aim and also each question is mapped back to the National Safety and Quality Health Services standards to give an indication of where they relate to in those standards. In the checklist, the orange text provides examples of actions that may already be happening. It's not prescriptive, it's giving an organisation a sense of what kind of work would go into answering each of these questions. And then there's space below to add your own examples of what's happening within your own work. If using this as an action planning tool, there's a space also to write the actions under each question, which auto-populates an action plan at the end you can print out and use for your work going forward. Each question and then overall the domain provides the opportunity to score as well if you're using this as a review tool, where you're having a look at how much evidence you can gather to answer yes to that question. Less or no evidence or basic evidence would be a 1, all the way up to more varied and more complicated and more examples of evidence that's meaningful to people with lived experience would give you a 5. So the toolkit, as mentioned earlier, has been written deliberately to be flexible and adaptable. It's not the end point, it's the start point. It's here to be used for whatever an organisation needs, recognising that there is such variety in the sector. We weren't writing one thing to be the tool for all organisations. It can be used for quality improvement, it can be used for strategic operational planning, it can be used for evaluations, self-reflections. It is mapped back to the safety and quality health standards, so it can be used as supporting evidence towards accreditation or funding applications, evaluations. It's encouraging collaboration, so it's not just the work of one person to do this, it's not just the work of one team to do this, it's really seeking a collaboration across an organisation, collaboration and partnership with people with lived experience and with organisational leaders, with allies within the organisation, teams across the organisation, regardless of role. It is a practical tool, which was really important for organisations, something that's easy to use, something that can be adapted. And it is suitable for any level of organisational maturity around lived experience inclusion. So it can be for organisations just starting out in the work to give a guide and to give places to start and things to consider. It can also be used for organisations doing this stuff really well as a chance to showcase what you're doing and recognise the areas that you are doing work to showcase, and then being able to leverage that for areas that need further development. Thanks, Daya.
Thanks, Fee. So benefits for organisation. Leading Change offers many benefits to organisations and the sector. So as we know, lived experience inclusion, partnership and leadership is a powerful driver for cultural change, which the toolkit can support. So Leading the Change also supports organisations around the recent growth in the peer workforce and expectations for co-design within mental health and social services organisations. Using the toolkit encourages collaborative work, executive leadership commitment, and quality improvement throughout organisations. So this is not something just for peer workers to do, but for all of us to do together. While the toolkit was developed for use in New South Wales, the content and approach will be applicable across jurisdictions, and we know that we have some people from across Australia attending today. Now we have some time for a Q&A section. So for any questions, please continue to use the Q&A function. I see that there are some questions that are already coming through the Q&A section, so thank you for those. And we'd also really encourage you to explore the toolkit on the Commission website via, again, the QR code on screen, or it should be available on our homepage now if you'd like to check that out. Please share widely through your networks to help us get the toolkit out there. And also please feel free to send any additional questions after this session to Fee or to myself via our emails on screen. We'd really love to hear from you around how you're using the toolkit moving forward. And we'll now hand back over to Deb for the Q&A section. Thanks, everyone.
And thank you so much, Darren and Fan. Thank you again for all the work that you've done. This has been, this has been a significant amount of work, and you've done an amazing job with our partners. Okay, so I'm going to kick off with a few questions, and the panel can, it might be better whether if I'll ask this one, the first one, which is why did you, your three organisations in particular, decide to do this work? Priscilla, did you want to answer, and then Jonathan, and then Daya or Fee?
Yeah, thanks, Deb. I guess generally speaking, because the decision for us to partner was made before I even started at Being, so I can only speak from a general point of view, obviously, that we believe there shouldn't be any excuses for organisations to not be including people with lived experience at every level. To give a real example, all of Being staff have lived experience, as do our board, as do our volunteers. It's not more expensive, it's not more difficult. You just have to understand that all of your team are individuals with their different needs and different requirements, and so you treat them as individuals. So having a guide like this that can help organisations that might feel a little bit timid about including lived experience at every level, I think is beneficial, because it takes away that that mystery or the fear of risk, and help organisations understand that it is really quite simple, and in our sector in particular, it's expected.
Thank you so much. Jonathan?
Well, we were very pleased to support this project because in part, especially after the review of seclusion, restraint and observation, where money was provided for a range of capital works across the state, and they're all meant to be co-designed, we understood that in fact there was a wide variety of expertise around genuine co-design, and that more genuine tools to support it being properly implemented were critical. But in fact, lived experience framework had also been released by the Commission, and the framework seeks to advance lived experience leadership in all domains across mental health services. And co-design is one area where assistance and expertise would be of benefit, but there are a number of other areas around advancing that leadership. And so providing practical support for services to address the very genuine complexities of implementing some of these aspirations, we thought was very, very much needed, and something we were very happy to get behind and support, and now to help promote the adoption of across New South Wales.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. And Daya?
Thanks, Deb. So from our perspective, as Jonathan's already mentioned there, this is a lead-on work from the Lived Experience Framework for New South Wales, which we did co-design in 2018. Some of you who are attending today, I think, may have been involved in those co-design sessions. And this partnership really made sense because with being a mental health carer in New South Wales, being the mental health consumer and carer peaks in New South Wales, obviously we would want to partner with them around this particular toolkit, focusing in on lived experience, inclusion and partnership. In terms of background, this was an action from Living Well in Focus, so Action 9, and that was something that came through developing this sort of evaluation toolkit from the consultation sessions through Living Well in Focus. So that's where the idea for this what ended up becoming a toolkit really came from, and really supported us in this work. So we're very pleased to be releasing this as another action completed under Living Well in Focus. Thanks, Deb.
Thanks very much. So the next question's from Sandra at Hunter New England. Without sufficient increased funding from the Ministry of Health, how can we ensure that LHDs and SHNs implement actions identified from the assessments and evaluations? Now, who'd want to put their hand up to answer that one? Daya, over to you.
I can jump in here, Deb. Thanks, Sandra. Great question. So from the toolkit kind of perspective, what our suggestion would be is to use the interactive checklist as part of the toolkit to really, as you've mentioned, assess how well the organisation is doing around lived experience inclusion, partnership and leadership. And then that may well be a basis or evidence that you could use for a business case, for example. So if there is increased resourcing needed, whatever that might look like, then the toolkit and the checklist is a way to gather the evidence required that there may be more resourcing needed, but also areas to identify for future growth or actions and to come up with that action plan. So that would be our suggestion for how you could use the toolkit to provide evidence, I suppose, for where further resourcing may be required. Thanks, Deb.
Okay, thanks for that, Daya. Another one from Katie. How would you suggest we scaffold our support system to determine burnout? Or is that to defer? Would that be more like to stop burnout rather? Who would like to take that question on?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to jump
Tim.
in and say that,
Tim,
oh, sorry.
It's all right. You go for it. Tim.
Look, sorry, I think I didn't mean to butt in there, Priscilla. I think burnout and preventing that is a significant issue for all workforces and all of us across mental health as we face a restricted budget and I think this is where adaptive and creative ways of working, but also the significance of being able to support each other and to identify when we need to ease back from our leadership roles and to go and to do things that keep us well. It's a difficult problem. But, I think everybody wants to get in there and do as much as they can, but at times we have we have our own personal limitations, and we have to respect that people need to take a break from difficult workloads. And I think that's where bringing new people on to people so that we have people who can fill in for us, so we don't have to worry about their expertise because they are leaders in themselves through the work we've been doing. I'm not sure if that answers the question. It's a difficult one.
Thank you very much, Tim. Priscilla.
Yeah, I agree 100% with Tim that this is a structural issue, and no matter where you're working, no matter what role you're working in, your manager should be making sure that you don't have too much work to do, you're not being bullied. Like, there's some basic management things that every manager should be doing to ensure that their team doesn't burn out. So the same thing goes for lived experience roles, I think.
Thank you, Priscilla. Now from Kerry, we've got a question. Has there been any consideration of some communication resources that can be shared or made public for people with lived experience to get involved? Who would like to answer that one?
I can probably jump in here again, Deb. So I'm not sure if I'm reading this question correctly, Kerry, but it sounds like you're asking if there is any sort of additional resources to go alongside the toolkit to support organisations for encouraging or improving how they're doing with lived experience inclusion. We haven't specifically created resources, as that would be something that each organisation would need to tailor to the work that they are specifically doing. But certainly a key aspect of this toolkit is improving and increasing lived experience inclusion and partnership. So the toolkit may be a starting point for organisations to consider how best to do that in terms of broader lived experience inclusion, and also when you're evaluating services and systems, how to get people with a lived experience involved around that as well. So we would suggest that you have a bit of a look at the toolkit, see how it may be beneficial for your organisations, and there may be some further resources and information in there that you could use to tailor specific resources out to the communities that you support.
Thank you, Daya. Now we've got a question from Tessa. Great to have these co-design resources for organisations to access. Will the Commission be monitoring which organisations will be using the toolkit? And it would be useful to see which organisations are building more inclusive workspaces. As mentioned, some sectors may be more open to this than others. So is that a question for me? I'm not, there's no plans at this point that I'm aware of to so more broadly be, having taking a monitoring function. If this, but of course, we're really interested to know if people are utilising the resources and how useful they are. And it might be, depending on how much utilisation there is in the system around them, that we might be able to, I don't know, I haven't talked to Daya about this, but, maybe there's often opportunities for communities of practice where people can get together and they can actually sort of help each other. But Daya, we haven't really talked about that, have we? But no to a monitoring. What support function there might be is probably limited, but there's if there was enough need for it, I'm sure that some type of community practice might be quite helpful to ensure the implementation is supported.
Thanks, Deb.
Daya,
And I might jump in here as well and just note that Fee and I would be really, really pleased to be hearing people's experiences when they are using the toolkit. And if there are sort of additional resources or any gaps that you're seeing there, we'd be really interested to get that feedback. So please do get in touch as you do have a look at the toolkit and start to use it within your organisation.
I think that the next question's great from John, and it's one we've all discussed, I'll have to say, but can our responses to the toolkit be independently verified either by our Mental Health Commission or another qualified body? And so there was this a bit of toing and throwing around, do you do even a scale 1 to 5 or what do you use? So who wants to answer that one?
I can probably jump in here again, Deb, if that's helpful. So I guess in terms of that question around being independently verified, to me that comes across as a question around whether organisations, for example, would be perhaps submitting their responses or how well they're doing via the checklist function. We don't currently have anything like that set up. As Deb mentioned, we aren't doing a specific monitoring function for this particular resource. So we won't have that function independently verified per se. However, it may be something that organisations that work closely together. So we know that within the CMO sector, for example, within mental health and social services spaces, there are a lot of small organisations that work in that sector. So it may well be that organisations could actually come together and see how well they're doing via the toolkit and via the checklist, and actually see where they could collaborate. If there are similar gaps across their organisations, there might be ways that they can work together to really improve lived experience, inclusion and leadership within their small space. So that might be a way where it wouldn't necessarily be independently verified, but it could be a useful resource or a tool for organisations to use to improve how they're doing in this space.
That's great. So another question around the same thing. How often will the toolkit itself be reassessed for possible expansion?
I think
Sorry,
that might be another question for me, Deb. So great question. We don't have a specific timeline around expanding or updating the toolkit. However, again, we would really encourage you to send through any feedback or experiences as you start to use the toolkit in your organisation. That is something that we're quite mindful of with receiving feedback. We have already done a sector focus group to get people's feedbacks at the end of last year, which went quite well, and we got some great feedback through do that. So now it's really about getting the toolkit out into the world, seeing how it works in practice in organisations, and starting to collect feedback. So again, would really encourage you to get in touch with FEORI so that we can start looking at how things are going and see if there is anything else that might be helpful down the track in this space.
Okay, thank you. And not a question, but just a comment from Kerry. Thank you for this inclusive launch. So important and wonderful to hear about the awesome collaboration and partnership. So totally echo that. And that's thank you so much, Kerry, for that. Another question that's come from Katie is, how can we develop more peer-led opportunities for Greater Southwest Sydney, seeing many gaps in the low socioeconomic areas? Anybody wanted to answer that? That's out to everybody. Oh, Tim, thank you, Tim.
Yeah, I think part of inclusion and leadership historically has been the evolution of this thing, the ship that we're building, Katie. So I think the next step for us is to move into these peer-led spaces, which will require continued advocacy through organisations like mental health carers and being and the Commission to enable that to happen for opportunities to develop. I think if we look at the figures that came out from the national the meeting that all the ministers had on last Monday, I think it was, there is a substantial unmet need around the psychosocial needs of people who live with serious and complex and mental health issues that is there. That's just not being serviced at all. That where people are unable to access anything, and it's these sort of spaces I think that we people with lived experience can build a really powerful argument to government around the utilisation of peer-led type interventions, whether they be peer support, whether they be groups, whether they be advocacy tools, whatever, because it is an area of huge need out there. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. No, that's so true. Okay, John's asking, what would you say about if people publicly reported their self-assessments and responses to demonstrate their effectiveness in this space? Who would like to talk to that?
Don't know if that's something that Priscilla and Jonathan they may find very, very useful as coming from the mental health consumer and carer peaks. That certainly could be something that could be looked at in terms of how organisations choose to do that. That would certainly be up to them. But it could be, again, the toolkit as a way for organisations to assess how well they're doing and to see where to next from here. And so a way to do that could be public reporting, being very transparent with the communities and the people that they are supporting and the work still to come. So that may well be a good way for organisations to take that forward. It sounds like Priscilla has some comments there to jump in on as well.
She's put her hand up.
Yeah, just to add that transparency is always a good thing. So if an organisation wants to use the toolkit and publicise its results, great idea.
Thank you for that. So, Elena, hello there. How are you going? Carers Australia has the Carer Inclusive Workplace Initiative, and Carers New South Wales has a Carer Plus Employers National Accreditation Program for carer-friendly workplaces. Were links made with these programs, as there are some synergies here that could complement each other? They are probably.
Thanks, Deb. And I don't know if Jonathan would want to come in on this one. Actually, Jonathan may want to speak to that.
Yes, well, thanks for the question, Eleanor. I don't think that we did specifically reach out to those other programs, but I can certainly see how this toolkit could be used by employers to better understand the supports that the people with caring responsibilities, or indeed the people with their own mental health concerns, could be better supported and accommodated within the workplace. And indeed, the sort of conversations that the toolkit supports and empowers would be very helpful in providing insights into the most meaningful assistance that could be provided by employers to people with caring roles, at things like the ability to work from home and so on. So yes, I can certainly see its application, but yeah, we didn't actually engage in the initial process around this.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. Now, there don't appear to be any other questions. Oh, yes. So it's just posted one. Katie again. Many thanks to everyone for your answers, especially to you, Tim. This toolkit is a wonderful idea and I'd say a great example of collaboration. So well done. That's great feedback. Thank you very much, Katie. Look, if there are no more questions, I can bring us to a close at just 1 minute or so early. Thank you all for your questions. It's great to sort of the breadth of those questions were fantastic, and of course the panel were very good at answering them very eloquently. You'll be sent a recording of the event if you have registered at the link in the invitation. It's not too late to register, so do that if you haven't done so, and we'll be able to send you a link. This will be published on the website as well, so in case you miss out on that, you'll be able to just go on. It'll be probably on the front. It will be on the front page. We hope we've demonstrated the importance of lived experience inclusion and demonstrated the value of the toolkit in making this easy for you to do this in your organisations. Thank you for everyone who attended today, and particular thanks to our speakers, our partners, and to everyone who took the time to contribute to the development of the toolkit. We'd love to hear from you about your experience of implementing the toolkit. So please reach out to Dara and Fee with your feedback or any questions that you had. And I'd like to thank you all in the closing and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you, team.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Deb.